Welcome to Turtle Talk. This is Morgan's story and the family's journey. I'm Craig, and
Hi, Michelle. Welcome.
welcome back. We're a couple weeks in down in Nebraska, and the last time we spoke, you were talking about meeting new friends at church.
At church. Um, Church was a great source of comfort for us. We met all these people that would come in from the outside. So it wasn't just patients and their families that were going to church there. It was people from the outside who would come to mass there. And so, I mentioned Mike. We had met Mike, and Mike was just a blessing. Met this wonderful lady named Ellen. Used to be a nurse. Funny, funny, funny lady. Just loved her. And she kind of had that teacher tone to her. So when I get too far on a pity party, she kind of scold me a little bit and say, "Now you just need to give it to God and focus on your daughter." And I so appreciated that. She was so, even though there was like a little bit of a harshness the first time she said it to me, she had a heart as big as gold. And it was just, oh, the love she has. It still to this day. I mean, these people are all our link, our hospital family, and we really appreciate our hospital family. Elizabeth, oh, dear Elizabeth, sweet gal. She came up and introduced herself, introduced me to a bunch of other people. Shane, Mary, gosh, there were quite a few of them. I can't even remember half of all their names because there were just so many of them. And every day that they would come, "How's Morgan doing? Is she making progress?" It was just throughout our whole time there, we were so blessed to have all of these new family members in our world.
Support.
Support. It was great because any one of them I could stop and cry with. You know, um, Elizabeth, Elizabeth ended up being a very close friend of mine. And when we first met, she stayed after church, and we sat and visited, and we realized we were such kindred spirits. It was like we were sisters. Like we had been sisters our whole life. And it was, we would laugh like little girls, and I could cry, we'd laugh. Um, oh gosh, we'd do some naughty little antics sometimes. Just
Not you.
never, not me, never. It was so great. Elizabeth would bring me supper every now and then, and she'd sneak a beer in for us. So we'd be sitting in Morgan's room eating and drinking our beer, and it was just a nice reprieve from the norm. And I was just so blessed to have met all these people. Shane, her husband's a police officer, and she is just such a faithful person. And just all these people have such amazing qualities. There's a couple, Mike and Amy, and they have a bunch of kids. And to this day, whenever we go down to this city, um, we walk into the regular church where they attend, and all our family attends. We walk in, and their kids are like, "Morgan's here, Morgan's here," and they run over and they tell mom and dad that Morgan's here. And we were driving down the street one day, and all of a sudden there's this vehicle next to us honking, 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 and they're all waving, and it took us a minute to realize who exactly it was. But that was one of our visits later on when we had come back to town. So it was really, really such a blessing to have these people on our side, praying for us, guiding us, comforting us. Like that was the big thing. So at the end of like week 2, I had come back, and I had been working, so I still had all my work gear on. I had just left from work and come down because weekends we'd switch. One would come in, The other would leave. That was our life. What happened during the week? What do I need to know for next week? What do you need to know? If time permitted, we'd spend one night together and the next day take off. And that was our time there. So we're at about the end of week 2, and Morgan's still running all these terrible fevers. And I just said, she doesn't, I was arguing with the nurse saying, I don't care what your thermometer says. She doesn't have a fever. A mom knows. Like, I'd kiss her forehead or kiss her cheeks. The old lip test. You touch your lips to their forehead, lips to their cheek, and you can tell. You can tell right away if they've got a fever. And I said, she does not have a fever. Yes, she does. And argue. So I get back and the fevers had still gone on. And I just said to Tom, I said, I got to fix this. I'm going to go buy a digital thermometer for Morgan. That's all hers, not this hospital one that they cart all over the place and everything. I'm going to go buy Morgan a thermometer. I said, so I'm going to go over to Walgreens. As soon as church is done, I'm going to go over to Walgreens. He's like, okay. Because on Saturdays and Sundays, church was in the mornings. So after church, I'm going to go. It's like, okay. I leave the rehab hospital, and Walgreens is like, I don't know, 5 blocks away or something. And I drive over there, I pull into the parking lot, and something just keeps telling me, go to CVS, which was on kitty corner across the street. And I'm like, why in the heck am I going to go to CVS? I've never been to a CVS, never at this point. Like, I am not going to CVS. This is fine. I'm going to Walgreens. I'm sitting in my car in the parking lot of Walgreens, looking like a raving lunatic because I'm having an out loud argument with myself over going to CVS versus Walgreens. Like, can you picture this?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm a little loony here.
It's in my head.
So I open the door to get out, and I get one leg out, and it's like, fine, whatever. And I get back in, and I slam the door, and I drive across the street. Whatever is guiding me is saying I need to be at CVS. So I drive kitty corner across the street. I get to CVS. I get out. I'm disgusted because why the hell am I here? I was going to Walgreens. What is pushing me so hard? And I'm wandering around the store. I'm not familiar with the store. I'm trying to find a thermometer. I'm mad because Morgan's here. I'm mad because she's got a fever or lack thereof. And I'm just pissy, right? That's the best word. I'm just pissy. All of a sudden, I find what I need, and I get a tap on the shoulder. And I turn around, and I'm like, kind of taken aback. And this lady says, did I just see you at Mass over at the rehab hospital? I'm like, yeah. She's like, well, I'm Mary, and, introduced herself. We started talking. And she's like, oh, I couldn't help but keep watching your daughter and you guys. And, oh, the love you guys just pour out on her. And it was just a beautiful conversation. And so, she said, well, I'll see you at Mass. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And she said, yeah, my husband is at the same rehab hospital. I said, oh, that's pretty cool. And we visited for a moment and stuff. And so we leave, and I drive over. Actually, sorry, let's back that up. I don't think she had told me about her husband being there, just that she had seen me at Mass there. So I didn't quite know about her husband yet. So I'm driving back over to the hospital, and I'm like, okay, this lady's following me. Like, what is going on, right? I pull into the parking lot. She pulls into the parking lot. I'm walking down the hallway. She's walking down the hallway. We're going the same place. And I'm like, I think this lady's stalking me. But she was such a super sweet lady.
Right.
Her husband was in the room right next door to Morgan. I was like, okay, God, I have figured this out now. You wanted us to meet them. And I'm very thankful that we met them because they became my hangout person. He was in there to get some therapy after being sick and just to build back up his strength. So every day he'd go to therapy, Morgan would do her therapy, we'd go to church, and then we'd all go outside and just sit and visit. And I just learned so much from them. So from that moment on, the joke became that when these unexplained things happened, Bob would just look at us and say, well, girls, it's a God thing. So it's a God thing became the new mantra for everything. And Bob, he was so funny. Oh gosh, and every now and then he'd scold me a little bit if I was getting too pouty pants. And he's like, you got an awful lot to be thankful for. And, so
What a good reminder.
yes, it really was. And so Bob and Mary have just become such a close-knit family with us. All of these people have. Whenever we go back to visit, we all get together and have a big meal at a restaurant. We have family dinner. And it's just awesome. It is so awesome. It really is awesome. So, some of the other things, now we have all these positives going on, but at the same time, there's an awful lot of negatives going on. We're still dealing with insurance. We're still dealing with this snarky insurance lady at the facility who I swear she took pleasure in coming to tell us, well, I guess you got approved for one more week. I don't know. Her personality and mine did not mesh at all, but hers didn't mesh with Tom's either. And Tom and I are opposites. So, yeah, I'm thinking maybe it wasn't us, but that's okay. Now, in all of this, we filed, it was like towards the end of leaving the trauma hospital and going to the rehab hospital. There was some paperwork filed by our legal counsel stating that we had an intent to sue. And when you do that, you have to list everybody. Like you cast a big net because this is very early on and no investigations really have been done. So you don't want to miss anybody, but you want to make sure your net covers everybody, right? So of course it's listing off different agencies and police agencies and things like that. Well, guess what? That triggered a whole response. So there were a few officers who just thought it would be fun to continually drive by our house or park on the corner across the street from our house or follow our kids as they're driving to school. So of course,
That's harassment, though.
it is harassment.
Okay.
It is. So in order to maybe explain this, we'll need to go back and explain what happened the night of the accident. So maybe that'll be next episode. But so we have the police constantly following us, our kids, parking across the street from our house, watching our every move, trying to intimidate us, harass us. We ended up putting video surveillance on the whole house, inside and out. Our kids are scared to death. Like, why are they harassing us? So we have the legal stuff going on. We have the harassment going on. Then you have the haters out there, right? There's always the haters. And I'm sure even this will have haters, but you know what? I'll just pray for them.
As long as they subscribe.
There you go. Just subscribe. Make sure. Haters, subscribe, please. So there were a lot of negative things that we're trying to handle as we're handling Morgan's care and trying to figure out what's going on. So it made things difficult, very difficult.
Just one more stressor.
It was one more stressor. Oh, and by the way, the thermometer trick worked. Guess what? Morgan didn't have fevers, actually. Their machine, after I brought in our own thermometer and stuff, they took the machine and had it serviced, and it wasn't calibrated correctly.
Oh. So, medication for no reason.
Mom was right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so
moms are usually right.
Yeah, moms are pretty much always right. I remember sitting in the chapel. So there's the priest there, and then he's got helpers, and Tom was talking with, I think, one of the chaplains actually that was there, and they were visiting, and then all of a sudden something they said caught Morgan's attention, and her head just whipped over and just stared at him, because we're still not hugely expression filled. We're still pretty somber looking, but her head turned and looked and just watched him. So whatever they were talking about really fascinated her and caused her to do this. So because of the brain injury, her head was to the left, and her left eye had a lot of difficulty and deficit going on. And so she was always kind of tight to the left, and we weren't quite sure of her visual acuity, things like that and stuff, so, and it seemed like, it almost like she was locked in. But when he had said that, she turned and looked, and it was just super spontaneous, which, what a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Well, once that happened, then we were sitting in church. After church, we'd always sit and pray for a while in the peace and quiet. There's great serenity when you do that, when you just spend time alone in the quiet with God. And Morgan would turn her head from the left to the middle and just stare at the Jesus statue. And it took us a while to notice that, because usually I'm praying through tears, trying to figure things out and stuff. And I'd notice it, Tom would notice it. Well, it wasn't until we talked and connected that, hey, this is a good thing for her. So, then we kind of decided that we needed to spend even more time in there, because it helped keep her head midline. If this is something that she's drawn to help keep her head in the center, this is a good thing. Otherwise, we're going to get a kink in our neck, and it's going to be not so good of a thing.
Okay.
So the presence of God in our lives, in the people that we met, and the blessings that they were all bringing to us, it's a God thing. Like Bob said, it's a God thing. He orchestrated a pretty beautiful plan. Now, mind you, through all of this, we're still talking with the priest in Chicago, Father Velez, and now we've started talking with Deacon Jack. So it was a pretty, how did that, let's see, Bob said something to the effect of, boy, you guys come with some pretty heavy hitters for God. And which, once again, how did a priest from Chicago find out about Morgan? And how did a deacon from Boston? The connections, it's pretty amazing how that all ended up. So at least during the negatives, we were surrounded by all the spiritual warriors, and we'd reach out for people to pray for Morgan all the time. I just knew, even when I knew in the hospital, I could feel her.
Yeah.
I could feel her, and I knew that this wasn't the end of her chapter yet. So, yeah, that was our blessing from being there. Was, I guess, if we had to pick a place, I wouldn't have used that as the criteria to pick a place, but I'm very thankful that that place had what we needed,
Right.
you know. So, yeah. Therapy. Therapy was pretty awesome. You know, the first through August, I mean, the whole first month it was let's focus on things like sitting balance, muscle memory, trying to get her to eat different things, you know, different textures in her mouth.
Did she have a favorite?
You know, anything chocolate was always her favorite.
No wonder her and Haley are fast.
Yes, you know, like she just chocolate is
Chocolate
her
pudding.
chocolate pudding. Yes, you know, they try little ice chips versus water. The whole goal was to get the tongue moving, trying to get her to swallow and give her choices, you know, like look this way or look that way to answer. So we're slowly starting to see things evolving.
Okay.
What we've learned in rehab world is nothing is fast.
Well,
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And the saying that was told to us in the trauma hospital was you're running a marathon at a turtle's pace. And they were not kidding. Because I prayed every week, Morgan, baby, come on, please just one thing on command. That's all you got to do. And we get another week. You know, I mean, these are simple things to you and I, but for her, you know, this is a
That's big.
monumental feat. Can you swallow a pea-sized bite of pudding because that qualifies you to stay? You know, luckily for us, she likes chocolate. So, you know, she could eat about 5 or 6, 7 little pea-sized bites and, you know, that afforded us to stay into week 3, even into week 4, you know. I wish I knew then what I know now. They started serial casting because remember now we had that foot drop.
okay.
Did we talk about the foot drop?
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So she had this horrible foot drop and they said, well, we're going to serial cast her to try and undo it. So what they do is they would massage and stretch as best they could and somebody would hold it with a lot of pressure and then they cast her foot.
Sure.
Leave it on for a few days, then cut it off, make a pair of splints out of it, right? Cut it in half, line it, put them back on her feet and make splints, right? Trying to at least hold the positioning,
Not let it get worse.
not let it get worse. But in the same breath, they were trying to bring it back up to a plantar grade. So plantar grade is how you and I stand,
Right.
okay? Knowing now what I know, that was a very archaic method. And now it devastates me that we did that. We let them do that.
It's like torture.
It is like torture. It's very painful. Very, very painful. We have Morgan had one of the premier foot surgeons in the United States who handled her feet care. And he said there is no level in which he would ever recommend serial casting. So now what we didn't know then, and we're like, oh, okay, you know, this is good. Let's splint her hands. You know, the hand splints I thought were good, you know, because we're trying to uncurl the curled up hands. Her hands were like this, you know, so splinting and stuff and stretching, you know, working those muscles, working those tendons, you know. So all of this is slowly starting to evolve. You know, we're trying to get her to bring her hand to her mouth, you know, as if she's going to give herself bites. In some aspects, some of the things that she was able to freely do then, we've maybe lost ground on now. It's not as easy for her to do some of those things, but we've awakened a whole series of muscles and nerve reactions. Neurons in her brain are like, whoa, hello. So her recovery still is constantly evolving. So we're still in the baby step phase here, and we're learning new little things. And like I said, my heart breaks, but I didn't know.
Right.
We didn't know.
And they thought it was best.
And they thought it was best. So the first month went by pretty well. We've met some new people now. We've got a really great church family support network. I mean, we still have our families, our extended families, which was great. And they reached out, they came to visit. It was nice to have that, because you really feel, when you're so far away from home, very isolated. Very, very isolated. When we were in the trauma hospital, all of Morgan's friends were constantly stopping by, saying hi, calling. And then we went away. And the calls got less and less. And the visits got less and less. And I imagine from their point of view, it's really hard to see their friend like this, the friend that they knew. So it doesn't surprise me that they've all faded out. In the same breath, to me, it's sad, because maybe one of those friends might be the trigger,
Right.
to help something else awaken. You just never know. Everything is an unknown game here, And it's a game no parent wants to play or should ever have to play. And it's a club that I pray other parents never have to join. Thank you guys for watching. We really appreciate it. We love hearing from you guys, so keep the comments and the questions coming for us.
Yes. Love the questions. Please subscribe. Go to www.givemorgan.org or visit me at my real estate website, realtorcraigbertrand.com. And we always want your questions, comments, like, and share wherever you listen or watch.
Thank you.
Thank you.